Hi, and welcome to episode number 7 of the Ultimate Social Media Guide. It's Darren here from Follow Our Media, and we're a social media marketing business. We help home and lifestyle service-based companies to increase sales and lead performance online. In this episode is going to be completely different to the usual ones that you may have been listening to. And we're very excited to tell you that we do have our first guest on the Ultimate Social Media Guide. So our very first guest, allow me to introduce to you all Darren Ockenden. Just to give you a brief synopsis of what Darren's about, he is the owner and founder of a marketing agency called Motion to Profit, and he's here today to talk to us all about podcasts. Darren, welcome, and thank you so much for being our first guest. As I say, I'm very excited to have you on as our first guest, and a little bit nervous, as I've already mentioned. Hopefully for me, it's a sign that my own podcast is going in the right direction, and I feel like I've been promoted a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And do you know what? Being nervous, I think, is a good thing, because as business owners, we always do well when we get nervous, get ourselves out of our comfort zone and push ourselves forward. So, yeah, well done, mate. Yeah, this and also, can I say, it's an honour, an absolute honour to be your first guest speaker.
Thank you very much. Cool. So to start with, Darren, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your business? Obviously, I've known you for some time, but for those of you that don't know you, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you basically got to where you are today.
Yeah, lovely. So I have a background in public services, and many years ago, in a different life, which I won't go too much into, I did a lot of training around cameras and stuff, and sort of took that on as a bit of a passion, making videos and stuff like that. And then a couple of years ago, we set up Motion to Profit. If you're watching on the video, you'll see that's my company there on the logo I'm wearing. And things were going really well, Darren. And we were growing, we were doing really good, building up some clients. I love marketing. I don't know what it is. I just find it absolutely fascinating what makes people buy. And I think we're both very similar like that, which is probably why we get on quite well. And then, as everyone knows, COVID-19 happens. And I'll be honest with you, in the first lockdown, it was just a case of just get through. I was quite lucky at the time that I was working, so I wasn't relying on the business for my income, so quite unique. And then things got back to normal in the summer, which was great, started to pick up, and then lo and behold, lockdown 2 happens around about this time last year. So it started, didn't it? We started getting the first, regional lockdowns and whatever it was about this time last year in November 2020. And then by December 21, we were pretty much in full national lockdown again. So it's around about this time last year that a few of my Motion to Profit clients started thinking, this is the second lockdown now in a year. We don't know, we need a bit of stability, so we need a way of getting out to our customers. And they said to me, have you ever edited a podcast? And and I think sometimes, like I was saying, the best thing to do is get yourself out of your comfort zone. So I became a podcast editor over time. Started training myself, and did podcasts. I'll fast forward on because I'm yapping, but basically, coming out of lockdown, the podcasts just absolutely astonished me, mate. I'll be honest. I think they're a brilliant form of marketing for a number of reasons, and we'll go into that through this episode. But basically, it's just something I don't want to stop. So I still love the video side of things. It's still my passion, but I really enjoy editing a podcast as well. I see some fantastic results that we'll probably go into, in this episode with podcasts. So we're carrying it on. But Motion to Profit probably doesn't fit the name for podcasts. It's very much Motion. It's very much about the video side of our business. So the podcast nest has very recently been born, and that will be the podcast side of what I do.
Brilliant. Cheers for that, Darren. So to kick us off then, what sort of podcast do you listen to yourself?
Yeah, great question. So I have 2 reasons that I listen to podcasts. So the first one, the most business corporate one, I listen to a guy called Alexander Siri. He does a business podcast. I think it's called Shift Success Podcast or something like that. So I'll be honest, mate, Alex is one of my mentors. He's fantastic. Even if you're not part of his sort of group, then for business advice, it's a fantastic podcast. So I listen a lot to that. It tends to be whilst I'm cooking a dinner or driving long distance, mix up with a bit of radio and so I listen to that. I listen to the Fearless podcast by Robin Waite, again, another business mentor. So they're the two that I very much listen to from trying to learn. And then during lockdown, my life was saved, I think, by Rob Beckett and Josh Whitcomb, the comedians who did the parenting hell. I think, I can't remember what it's called exactly, but it's about parenting hell during lockdown. Having two young children myself, very young, sort of, they were 2 and 5, I think, at the time. So it really was hell when they weren't at school. And I just found that very relatable, very good. And then the geeky side of me, I think, I love learning, mate, as I sort of said, with the business side, but my absolute passion more than anything else is history. So I also listen to Dan Snow's History Hit. I love it, mate. I could listen to history all day. Very boring like that. So yeah, they're the 4 I listen to be honest, mate. I do sometimes listen to them outside of that, but they're the 4 main ones, 100%.
So it sounds like you sort of split down your own targets in your sort of personal and business life, and you've got your sort of different categories for those as well. So that's really interesting to hear about, actually, because I think,
yeah, definitely, mate. I think, like anything in business, whether you're talking about social media, whether you're talking about podcasts, you have to put the time and the effort in. And for me personally, sort of 10-15% of that is always going to be about learning, improving and improving what we do day in, day out. And I think podcasts are a great way of doing that, because I tend to listen to podcasts whilst I'm cooking my dinner. I do a lot of fresh cooking with me and my wife. So she'll put the kids to bed. I'll put it on through Alexa and just listen as I'm learning. And that's sort of the benefit of podcasts away from social media, I suppose, is that I wouldn't be able to sit there on social media and do something there. So podcasting gives me the ability to learn whilst I'm actually busy doing something else, so that actually once I've eaten my dinner, I'm happy that I've done something practical whilst cooking, and then I don't feel so guilty about sitting down and watching it and chilling with a bit of TV after my dinner with my wife.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you sort of highlighted how accessible podcasts are for people. I think that's one of the main benefits. So for you in the business world, what is a podcast to you?
Yeah, that kind of, I've already said this. So essentially, mate, I don't know in previous episodes if you've covered this, but I always think about Google's 0 moment of truth, and the lessons that they teach us. So we live in a world today where before people make buying decisions from us, they tend to really look into us and our business to see who we are. So Google, with their 0 moments of truth, they've basically come up and said, right, what you need to do as a business owner is 7-11-4. So 7 pieces of content, 11 touch points on 4 platforms. Now, I think the biggest benefit to podcasts is that what it does what it gives you the ability to do is repurpose a lot of the content you've already taken the time to create on your social media, repurpose that into a podcast and hit another platform. So you're building that 7-11-4, that know, like, and trust, we call it, to really get into your target market. There's something else about podcasts that I think they're very easy to listen to when you're busy. So when you've not got time for social media, when you've not got time to be reading, you can just stick on a podcast with earpods, earphones, whatever, walk the dog. I listen to it a lot whilst I'm driving. So it's a way of sort of giving your customer the ability to consume your information whilst they're also busy. And I think podcasts are great for that. And also, I think that to have a podcast series, you're sort of seen as an expert. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of like your brand authority, I think, especially if you're in sort of the training field or mentoring or anything like that, to have a podcast is just a great way of adding more valuable information and almost building up a value library for your customers and also your potential customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you next sort of about how it can help business owners, but I think you've sort of covered that with the sort of the know, like, trust element of it, and how you're building up on that at 7-11-4. So I think
definitely, mate.
Right, and the way it can be used, it matches that really well, especially as you say, when people can consume that information and that content without really putting any effort in. It's just there in the background.
It is, yeah, and we have to put the time in. It is there in the background, and this is the thing with media, right? And I think you'll probably agree with this from your social media side, is that we put a lot of effort into creating media, and then quite often the problem with social media is that as you create more, the media you've created falls down your pile. So certainly on sort of Facebook, is that if you did a live now, Darren, this live, for example, if we were live in your group now and we were talking, in 6 months' time, this is going to be quite far down unless you pin it or something like that. But then there's only so many you can pin. So in a year's time, this media, what this conversation now is pretty far down the list, and it's unlikely to then hit people. By repurposing that, you're creating a whole library for your business. So what you're doing is you're collating all that really valuable input together, which you've spent a lot of time creating, and you're giving it to people over any platform they choose, essentially, where they can just come and listen to it, and it just sort of creates a little library for them. And that's what I think one of the biggest sort of benefits to it is. So what this means is, one of my clients does this really well. He's got 33 episodes now, and we'll talk about him in a minute. He's got 33 episodes. So if he gets a question, for example, as a mentor, how do I take on an apprentice? I see the other day in one of his Facebook groups. So instead of just saying, taking a time, writing all this out, this is how you do it, seek help from these people, whatnot, all he does is go, there's a link to my podcast.
Absolutely.
The benefit of that is then he's moving from one platform to another, which will help build up that know, like, and trust. But it also gets them onto his podcast. So if that person listens to that episode, which we already know they're engaged with because they're already asking the question, they're probably then going to think, oh, what else is this guy talking about? Absolutely. So if that then becomes a potential customer, that's built such a strong relationship. And that's where I think the power of podcasts really comes out. It just builds that authority and sort of places you as an industry expert.
Absolutely, yeah. I couldn't agree more, especially with how widely available they are. They're on several platforms, and ultimately free for people to consume that content, which is certainly, from my point of view, an amazing thing. A question that I'm very interested in, because obviously we're 7 episodes in now, and I've been going out on a weekly basis. So my next question to you is, how many podcasts should someone produce in terms of frequency? How often should they be going out?
Yeah, and this is a question that I get asked quite a lot. I had a discovery call with someone the other day where we were discussing their podcasts. To be honest, Darren, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this. People will come up with answers, but I don't really trust them. I think for me, between 1 a week and 1 a month is ideal. So the important thing is that we're consistent, so that if people are listening, they know that every month there's going to be one, every 2 weeks there's going to be one, whatever there is. But I don't think people should overstretch themselves. When we start things off, we always think, I'm going to do one every week. But one every week becomes very hard, especially when you then say, I'm going away that, in that week. Yeah. So I would say anywhere between 1 a week and 1 a month, which is 52 to 12 a year. So it's a really wide finger, but be consistent. And and obviously the more media you produce, the more likely you are to get better results, because there's more chance of you latching on to people and people, subscribing to your podcast, then following your social media or whatever that is. But yeah, the answer is, for me, I think you need to look at your business, realize how busy you are, and then decide whether you want to do 1 a week or 1 a month, and what you can deal with, not just now, but also in 6 months' time, when you've got a load more work in, that you're busy scrapping around trying to get done, because that's how we pay the bills, right? So yeah, I would just say, think about the future, be consistent, and then just do it over the year and see how it goes.
Yeah, that fits in really well with when people ask me, how many posts should we be putting out there every week? And it's pretty much the same answer, that it's let's have a look at your schedule, let's have a look at the type of content that you want to put out there, and let's establish a routine that you can comfortably maintain over time, given all the external factors. So that fits in really well with what I would sort of give as an answer to social media content questions regarding how much should go out.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, Darren, I think that podcasts and social media are very similar in a lot of ways. So, for example, I'm sure you'll agree with social media, is that if you start spamming out content that's not actually that engaging to your potential or target market, potential customers, whatever you want to call them, then actually people are just going to turn off and not be that interested. It's much better to have, say, instead of having one every day that doesn't really engage people, you'd be much better off doing one a week that people find really interesting and leave them wanting more. And it's the same with podcasts. The main thing is that you're offering value to your target customer. By offering value to your target customer, you will find that people will be more interested in what you're saying because they're getting value from it. And that to me is the most important thing. So I would rather do one a month, which is just 12 a year, which then doesn't sound like a lot, but have loads of value in there so that the next time it pops up that, our Darren Edwards and Darren Ockenden have got their new podcasts out, then they're like, oh, I want to listen to that. That to me is the most important thing. It's all about quality of your content.
Absolutely. It's that value that you're providing to your listeners, to your viewers, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Ultimately, what we're trying to do here, whether it's a podcast, social media, any form of marketing, is we're trying to generate sales to grow our business. And we do that by showing people that we can offer them value and that we're going to fix their problems. So, for example, with me, if someone comes to me and says, I really want to get out and engage my target market, I need to be able to show them that we can do that with them, that we can build this podcast series, that we can get them out there and grow and help them grow leads. If I create a social media post where I just come on bumbling my way through something for an hour every day, that's pointless. Whereas if I come on and offer them, perfectly decent ways in which they can go about building their podcasts, in which they can make their podcast more engaging, and as a result of that, they do start to grow, they're more likely to come to us as a business and say, actually, you obviously know what you're doing. Let's crack on, let's sign up and let's do this. And then you can just get the results for the client. It's just a much better way of doing it, really. And it just sounds really simple, doesn't it? But I see this so much, especially with new businesses, where they feel like they just have to do it because it has to be done. And actually, they should be focusing on the quality of what they're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah, and it makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Cool. So if you could create any podcast, what would it look like?
My problem is that I think the best podcasts are, I like my comedy, mate, to be honest, and I like real life situations. So we all have struggles in life, no matter where we are. I remember, when you're a teenager, things feel like they're big problems, and that's life. I'm at that age now where I'm a dad. I'm in my 30s. I've got 2 young children. I've got 3 and a 6-year-old, and I like to listen and relate to people with the same issues as me. So this is one that I'm actually thinking about creating, to be honest, if time allows. But I've got a mate called Nick and a mate called Charlie. We're all football dads, so our sons play football for the same team.
Okay. And
we were just laughing and joking the other day, saying I'd like a real world podcast, where you're listening along and you're talking about real world problems that people can relate to, and be honest about it. And I think that's what I like about the podcast that Josh Whitcomb and what's his name, the other comedian, did. The problem is that because they're celebrities, you don't really truly engage with them, whereas 3 overweight middle-aged men who have to do the same things as what most of the country have to do at this stage of life, I think could be really relatable. So yeah, I don't know what I'd call it, but Nick and Charlie, they're funny people as well, so there'd be a lot of comedy and a lot of humour in there, and I just think it'd be really light-hearted.
Yeah, I think certainly from my point of view, because I'm an overweight dad and with an 11-year-old, so you'd probably get your first subscriber here. That does sound really good, to be honest.
But this is the thing, though, Darren, as well, right? And podcasts are a really good way of marketing. Like if we go back and just think very quickly, just thought about this. Josh Whitcomb and Rob Beckett, during lockdown, they created this podcast, and no one thought to themselves, that's marketing. Because they're comedians, they just thought, oh, that's brilliant. I can listen to that and I can keep listening. It's free. I ain't got to pay for it. But I bet you, by staying in people's minds, by continuing to put their comedy out there, it's almost like a lead magnet. So that when you're coming out of lockdown and things are opening up again, I can tell you now, I've seen Rob Beckett since lockdown live. And we did that because we really like that podcast. So it was a form of marketing. And that's ultimately what a podcast is. It is a form of marketing. Yeah, sorry, I just thought I'd add that in there.
No, I think you're onto a valid point there. I think any form of marketing where the end user of that marketing, so the consumer of that marketing, doesn't realize it, I suppose is the best actual form of marketing, because you're not thinking in the back of your mind, someone's just trying to sell something to me here. If you're actually enjoying that podcast, for instance, and you're consuming it without any real effort, I think that's probably one of the best ways to go with it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is.
So as someone who obviously creates podcasts for people, or at least compiles the end result, from your point of view, and from a point of view of someone that may want to do their own podcast, are they difficult to produce from start to finish?
No, they're not. So on the Podcast Nest on our Facebook page, easy to find. This is something I'll be covering probably in more detail over the coming months. So look, let me be honest with you, Darren. Anyone can create a podcast. You don't need someone like myself to do it for you, okay? You don't use me. There's no drama in that, mate. You're quite tech savvy. Anyone can do it. You don't even have to be tech savvy. If you've got a little bit of time to put into it, there's platforms like Anchor, which is powered by Spotify, that are brilliant, and they make that process a lot easier. So I really recommend Anchor. I've recommended it on my group, and I'll be doing more probably in the next few months, just to sort of show you a bit more step by step. Not everyone has the money to outsource for podcasts and stuff, and I still want to help those people, because I think that there are huge benefits to it. What the difference is, I suppose, and this is where, obviously you don't set up a business around things that people can just do themselves. It does take a little bit of time. It takes an investment in time, and not everyone has that time. So we don't charge the earth for podcasts. It's not something that takes huge amounts of time. So like, for example, with my video work, I might be charging 3-4 days worth of labor for 1 day's filming, because the editing and the effects and all that sort of stuff. Podcasts aren't like that. You do some corrections and stuff. But we edit it in the Adobe suite, which is, a bit more of a professional platform. So look, what I'm saying is you can do it yourself. And if you can't afford to outsource it, I would definitely recommend you start doing that. It will take you a little bit more time. Anchor gives you some fantastic programs to play with, but you're never going to get the professional edge in which you will if you're using the professional software. So what we use. So get started, get going, build it. And you know what, if it goes well, then maybe you look at professional down the line. Follow us on Podcast Nest, and we'll try and show you how easy it is. And it's not hard, mate. I've met people that are not very tech savvy, and they manage to work through it. It just takes a bit of time, a bit of patience, and of course, reach out, ask. Well, I know you're a very approachable guy, Darren, and I am as well. I'm always happy. I've had Zoom meetings with people explaining them how to do it, and I come off thinking, well, why have I done that? But I just enjoy helping people, mate. So I'm sure, reach out and we'll help you.
Absolutely. I'm much of the same. I'll speak to people and tell them exactly what approach I would take with the business in relation to the social media marketing. And if they can go away and do it themselves, then that's absolutely fantastic. But if they want to come back at a later day saying, oh, we're now that busy, or the revenue's increased, to be able to outsource that process that we really want out of the way, because then we can concentrate on the core business activities. That works really well.
And that's what I think in our line of work, actually, a lot of it is human to human, isn't it? We always gone about B to C, D to C, whatever, C to B, sorry. But we're human to human. And, if I help you now create your podcast and give some hints and tips about that, the whole point of you doing this is to get busier, to get more clients in. And at some point, you're going to want to outsource that because of time. So it is a bit of an investment. But do you know what? Actually, mate, I just enjoy helping people, and I've got the time, and I'm always happy to. So yeah, anyone thinking about doing it and you don't want to outsource it, don't let that stop you following the Podcast Nest and contacting and engaging me, because I'd like to help you do it. One day you might come back to us as a client, but even if you don't, do you know what? If it gets you some business, then it's a good thing. I only ever put the time out there that I'm free. So, you're not going to take me away from my wife and kids or whatever. Yeah. And if I'm free, I might as well be helping someone.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And, I'm part of your Podcast Nest and can, vouch for the hints and tips that you're putting out there are really useful for people. And as you say, they're for everybody, even if you sort of got in the back of your mind that you might want to do a podcast at some stage, or if you're sort of well into the process, those hints and tips do go a long way.
They do. One of the biggest tips that I would give is to very much think about your message and what you want to get across. That's the most important thing. Is you can have an intro that's not professionally made. You can have it so that it's not professionally edited. You can have that doesn't matter as much as what your message is. If you've got value to offer your clients, and you want to get across, the main thing they care about is what you're saying. The quality people can see past if the message is correct. So it does take a bit of time to do it yourself. Not a huge amount. A platform like Anchor will make it a lot easier for you than what it was years ago, but do it. If you've got a message to get out there, just do it. Don't procrastinate.
Absolutely. So you've touched on it already, really, with making sure you've got that message and that purpose. So what other important aspects would you consider for podcasts? What do we need to consider when looking at putting it together?
Yeah. So there's the guest speakers, mate. I know you're at 7 episodes in now.
Absolutely.
And I think this is about as late as I'd have left it to bring in a guest speaker for me personally, and that's personal opinion.
Absolutely, yeah.
I just think it adds a bit of variety. It brings in something different. It brings in a skill that, we can't be the expert in everything. We have to accept the fact that there are other people who know more about certain aspects of business than we do. It just adds a variety. It adds some spice, but also it will help you grow the podcast, because we've already discussed this before we started recording, Darren. I want to post this out to my community because I'm offering hopefully what people are finding valuable, and I want my community to benefit from that as well. So what people might find is that they listen to this episode because they're one of my followers, and they go, oh, this guy's all about social media, so they'll think, I'm going to follow your podcast, so that will help you grow. And be consistent, mate. But I've said it so many times, I'm not going to apologize for saying it again. The biggest thing that you must do if you're doing a podcast is make sure that every episode is structured and has value in it to your target market. So don't try and create a podcast that captures everyone, because you won't do it. Think about who your target customers are, add value for them, and do that on every episode, and it will grow. With the guest speakers is just about more exposure. So you're creating value. You want to now get that value and show it to the world, and the guest speakers will help you expose that out to more people who will then hopefully like your message and start following your business. They'll go from your podcast to your social media, and that's how it works, isn't it? Absolutely, yeah. And I think certainly from my point of view, touching on the sort of the guest speakers thing, you bang on with the money there. With I can't be an expert in everything social media, and for me, podcasts are a form of social media. And by bringing people on like yourself, where I was a disadvantage, it just provides even more value to people that are listening or watching this episode. So it's a no-brainer for me, and I think you're right. It's probably as late as I did want to leave it, really, because the value that someone like yourself can bring in is amazing for podcasts. Yeah, and yeah, you know what, mate? Most business owners will be on more than one social media, right? Like most of us are on Facebook because it's just a giant. I think there's about 2.1 billion active users. Many of us in the creative industry will be on Instagram. Instagram's something that I've not even really touched, to be honest, and I probably should do from video stuff. Excuse me. And then LinkedIn, if you're business to business, you'd probably be on LinkedIn. We already sort of we already see the value of getting out there on as many platforms as possible to capture the people in. And you're absolutely right, a podcast is just another way of doing that. The difference is that at the moment, and this is just my opinion, Darren, at the moment, every business, every single business, even businesses that aren't registered with, say, Companies House in the UK as an official business, can be on Facebook. It's easy to do. to do a podcast takes that little bit more investment in your time. You have to know what you're talking about, or people just see straight through it. And that's why I think the brand authority that comes with a podcast is that little bit, it's a little bit of added extra, if that makes sense.
You're increasing your stance, aren't you, a little bit?
Yeah, and I don't want to do it out of what you're doing, because I see what you're doing. I follow a few of the groups that you manage, because we work with some clients, and the same clients. And when the content is professional with a professional doing it, it stands out a world apart from someone who's got a job and they're just trying to grow their business and they're at the very beginning of their journey. But I think to have a podcast just stands you out that little bit more, in a similar way to having a professional social media manager does. Like, it just, I don't know. I think you probably know what I'm saying. I don't need to explain it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. You can tell the difference between the standard of exposure, be it content going out, or, like you say, when people are just starting podcasts, it's the same sort of thing. They're starting on their journey, and you can see that improvement. You can ultimately see it when a professional takes over as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, Darren, go on.
Sorry, and I think that's the thing with podcasts, is that what you don't find are the people who are very, very new to business, just getting their sort of feet on the ground. They don't tend to do podcasts because they're not confident enough yet. So to have a podcast, I think, adds that little bit of brand authority as well. It pushes that, and also podcasts are going to be shared over all your social media platforms. The other important thing I just want to say, Darren, I don't know if this is the right time, but what we do really well with social media is we repurpose content. So, for example, for me, if I create a video that I'm going to put out on my Facebook page through my business, I'll do that on my LinkedIn page as well. Yeah. And then I might put that on my YouTube channel, and that's the same video posted over the free platforms to maximize the exposure that we talked about. But for some strange reason, we don't do that with podcasts. So, we're recording this, I hope you don't mind me saying, live on a Zoom call. And this is the sort of thing that you would perhaps just post a video on your social media, but not many people will take that one further and actually create that into a podcast. Now, they're the best podcasts, because with your social media, you're already trying to deliver value to your customers, which is exactly what you should be doing in your podcast. So why not take a very little extra amount of time, or in our case, a very small amount of money, just to say, right, make this into a podcast and get it out on podcasts as well. Repurposing saves so much time, so much effort, and it just maximizes your exposure over yet another platform that will give you brand authority.
Absolutely, yeah, couldn't agree more. And it's probably one of the most overlooked things when it comes to marketing, how you can repurpose one thing into lots of other things. I've previously tried to sort of document how I repurpose some of my content, but it just looks like a mess on a piece of paper. But it's amazing how you can sort of formalize that and say, right, this podcast, for instance, it's primarily recorded, as you say, on Zoom for a podcast, but that will then also go over to my YouTube channel. That can be then dragged out. The transcript can be used for a blog, and then you can use snippets for your content on social media. So yeah, you're absolutely right there with the repurposing. It's there to be used, and vastly underused by people, I think.
Yeah, and this all goes back to what we were saying at the beginning with the 0 moments of truth, which people can Google. You can go onto Google, type in 0 moments of truth, and it will show you the research. But essentially, in modern day, we need to get out there as much as we can and build that relationship with people, because people have the internet at their fingertips and they can research before they make a buying decision, especially the more expensive ones. So, we want to get out there as much as possible, and repurposing, I think, is huge. It's not done nearly enough, which means productivity in your business sort of falls quite significantly. Yes. And you're absolutely right. We've already discussed this. You're going to post this as a video. You'll post this as a podcast. You're going to have it as a blog, hopefully, for your website if it's suitable. And actually taking one on further, once you're 50 episodes in and you've got 50 blogs, hopefully, or say 40 blogs, because some of them might not be appropriate. What's then to stop you start using a lead magnet as a book? We've seen that done before, and it's extremely effective, because when you're offering someone a free book, if it's good value content and it's helpful for people, that's a great way of building trust, because now you're an award-winning author. You've seen it, Darren. I know you have.
Absolutely, yeah.
And again, you know, if I said to you now, right, write me a book, I need to be 100,000 words, you'd be thinking, oh my God, you know, how am I going to find time to do that?
Yeah.
But actually, when you've got 2 years down the line, 100 blogs there, all with different subjects that could be different chapters, you can see how that then becomes a very manageable task, and one that you can actually outsource. Not to me, I will add, I'm not a very good writer, but one that you can eventually go and outsource. And this is the thing, is that if you repurpose content, all you're doing is saving yourself a load of time, which you can then focus on your clients. You're probably costing yourself a very little bit of money, but then for the time benefit, that's probably well worth it. And then before long, you know, in a couple of years, you're going to have loads of media. And what I find, I speak to a lot of new businesses as well, Darren, and people get very frustrated with media because it takes so much time. Yeah. Being consistent, and I know you probably talk about this on you know, in your podcast, but it's about being consistent. Podcast is the same as any media. Create it little and often, and keep getting it out there, and every time you do, that's just another way to engage. And the more you get out there, the more value you offer, the more people will start to come into your business. But remember this, is that when you start creating your podcast, like any form of media, you're planting a seed, and then what you're doing with every episode is you're watering that seed, and that will grow and grow and grow and grow. So can I give you an example of this with a mutual friend, actually?
Absolutely, yeah, go for it.
So so I got a client. We've been working with him since, I think it was June that we started his podcast. His name is Bill. I know he won't mind me talking. Bill is a sort of person of influence within the dog grooming sector. He does business training for dog groomers. So, you know, dog groomers are generally fantastic at grooming dogs or pets, should I say. But when it comes to the business side, there's a lot that, like any of us, that they can learn. So we started creating Bill a podcast in June. He's 33 episodes in now. He's had over 4,000 listeners. He pushes his podcast on his social media channels, which helps build those numbers. Now, Bill does outsource all that work to himself, but Bill now is and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, I don't think he will, but Bill now is in negotiation with someone to sponsor his podcast. So essentially, without going into the figures, Bill will now make money out of creating his own podcast series, which will be a lead magnet for his own business. So he's in that dream situation at the moment, if you like, where someone's paying him to create a podcast which is going to bring himself in customers, and no doubt the sponsor will benefit as well, hopefully. But what a great position to be in. 33 episodes in, it's taken him 6 months, and I tell you now, 99 point not well. In fact, I've not known anything to not be repurposed. So these are all lives that he's doing. These are all webinars, whatever it is, that are simply repurposed. He pays me a small sum of money. They come back as podcasts. He puts it out there. And 6 months later, he's now making money from his podcast, which is also helping him to build his business. And the other good thing about this is that Bill uses his podcast to answer questions within his group, which saves him loads of time.
Bill smashing it, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Well, we both love Bill, we obviously. But this is what I want to do for more of my clients, mate. I'll be honest. This is what inspires me with podcasting and moves me. I wouldn't say away from video, because I still love video. It's still a great way to engage people. But it's why I've not stopped the podcast after lockdown, because actually I see so much potential in podcasting, and I want my clients to experience that. And, we'll grow with that, no doubt. People will pay us, but ultimately I want them to see the benefits of it. And if in a few years' time I can have 10 clients that are all being paid to make their own podcast, which is bringing them in more business, and they're earning more than my fee, then I'm really happy with that, mate. It's, in my opinion, that's an all-round win. They're creating their media, they're being paid for it by someone else, which is fantastic. Someone else is happy because they're getting exposure for their business, and I'm happy because I'm building my business by delivering for my clients. So that's the ideal. And we're there with one client so far, and we've got a few more hopefully coming. I think I've definitely got the potential to get there as long as we're consistent, as long as we look at the analytics and make sure that we're hitting that sweet spot with podcasts.
Brilliant. So
I'll talk about analytics, mate. I'm sorry.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so I've got no doubt that you do this with social media. I bet you if I went to one of your clients now and said to you with one of your clients, what's their most successful social media post, you'd probably be all over it and tell me straight away. Podcasts are exactly the same, mate. The good thing with platforms like Anchor, if you're doing it yourself, is that it will tell you what episodes are being listened to the most. It will tell you where they're listening from, the times they're listening. Use that information because it's being given to you by the podcast suppliers. Use that information, see what's doing well, identify what it was about that episode that people liked, and do that more. That's one of the best ways to grow as well. Because if people are liking it and you're creating more of it, and then you're reviewing it again, you're saying, actually, I like that one even more, and you identify why, within a year, you'll have a kick-ass podcast series, hopefully. Yeah. And that way you can then, then smash it. And same social media, mate. Same with any marketing, isn't it? It's the analytics is the boring part, but it is very important as well. I do analytics after every 10 episodes. Give it 10 episodes, see where you're at, identify what ones are popular. So, for example, if you don't have any guest speakers in your next 3 episodes, and then this one is doing really well, you need more guest speakers, that might be one of your things.
Absolutely, yeah. I think because I use Anchor. I think it's a great tool to use. And I think I'm at that stage, only sort of 6 episodes under the belt so far, soon to be 7, where looking at the analytics still excites me a little bit. It's good to see how they're performing. So I think, long term you can get the analytics can get a bit boring, but as you say, they're there to be used. And if it's showing you where your podcasts in this case have done really well, and if you can replicate that, then they're there to be used for an amazing purpose. So absolutely.
Yeah, that's it, mate. And with our backgrounds, this is what we do, isn't it? We look for things to improve, and it's quite natural to us. But then I think a lot of other business owners that are not, from this sort of marketing world, if you like, I think a lot of people I speak to find it really boring, which is why I like to just give like a little bit of a rundown about the analytics, what episode was, what I think is pushing that episode further. So yeah, that's a massive top tip there. I think, do the boring stuff. Like you said, to start with, you'll be all over the analytics. Absolutely. Because it's new and you're like, wow, it's shiny and I love it. But as you go on and you get more into your podcast, you'll be a bit like, well, I might not bother, and that's a mistake. You always want to know what's doing well and then replicate that and improve and improve and improve. And that's what the best businesses do. That's all they do. They just get better and better and better and better. Because no one starts perfect, do they? Like you saying you're 7 episodes in, you're quite nervous. I get nervous in my group sometimes when I go live. I'm sure your listeners have realised I talk too much when I'm nervous.
This is my first podcast where I've not pressed stop and start again, ultimately because you're here. So usually it's retake.
Do you know what though, mate? And again, this is another thing, another tip. For me personally, I think having that less natural side and seeing the human side to us is better. The whole point of media is to get to know the person that our clients will hopefully sign up with. So, as a business, what we're trying to do is show people who we are, because ultimately when they sign up with us, it's us they'll be working with, or, if they're taking our advice, they want to know who we are. And sometimes I think when you're so professional that you don't see that, it's almost like picking up a brochure. You don't trust it as much. It's much better to see the human side. And that's why if you look at the videos in my group, a lot of them are like, where I've literally lost it and I can't think of what I was saying. But you know what, mate? I'm human, and that's what we do, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a real good way of looking at it. I like that.
Yeah. So when you do your social media stuff, you don't just do it in heat of the moment, do you? It probably takes planning. You probably think through, but it's good to know who the person really is. See the human side of them. I certainly like that about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. So what's your favourite podcast produced? I know we've touched on some already, but is there any others you want to mention?
Sorry, the favourite podcast, what?
Favourite podcast produced that you've sort of produced?
I
know we've mentioned Bill, haven't we, already?
Yeah, and I'm going to actually start. I'm going to go... I'm going to answer this in two questions. No, I'm not. I was going to go on to... I had a discovery call with someone the other day who's a dog trainer, and I can see so much potential with that, but I'm not going to go into that, I don't think, actually. The best podcast that I've produced was... and this kind of flows on from where we were about saying, let them see you for who you are. I edited Bill's first ever podcast with a guest speaker called Tara Halliday. Tara Halliday, I think her name is.
Yes.
And she talks about something called imposter syndrome, which I'm assuming you've probably heard.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so essentially it's that niggling voice in everyone's brain, especially when you're first starting out in your business. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's that like,
it is, absolutely.
Yeah. What do you know about podcasts or social media, Darren? Who are you? Everyone has it, mate. People that don't, there's something wrong with them. That's my opinion, personal opinion. But when you're first starting out, we're all nervous, right? We all have imposter syndrome, and we generally will continue to practice at something, practice, and then we'll get good at it. And we just get good. We're not necessarily getting better at what we're doing. What we're getting better at is talking about it. I edited that episode, and I had to keep going back and doing it because it's got so engrossed to listening to what she was saying. I just found it so sort of like relatable because it was quite early on into our podcast journey. I'll be honest, mate. This is a bit too much, honestly, I think, but it's quite early on into my podcast journey, and I was still doing a lot of training, a lot of research when I didn't know how to do bits. To then have an imposter syndrome episode come on when you're feeling a bit of an imposter yourself because you're still learning, you're still trying to do this, but you're still obviously charging for the time.
Yes.
It just hit really hard. It made me smile, but I thought, what a bloody brilliant first episode, because when you think about its target market, so we said Bill does business training for dog groomers. Dog groomers, if you put a dog in front of them, they generally would do a fantastic job. But when you say to them, what account are you using? Are you set up as a limited company or a sole trader? Start asking the business questions. Most of them, not all of them, some of them are fantastic, but most of them are like, I don't know. I didn't learn that in college. I just learned how to. So you do feel like a bit of an imposter. And I can see why he started that episode. And yeah, I just thought it was brilliant, mate. Yeah. Tara Halliday, I do recommend, I don't know Tara, but if anyone's feeling like they're a bit of an imposter, go and listen to that. It will put a lot into perspective for you.
Absolutely, yeah. I've listened to some of Tara's stuff, and yeah, the way she explains it, and the hints and tips that come along with that. Absolutely, yeah. Anybody listening or watching, yeah, jump on that all day long.
Yeah.
So, Darren, what type of clients do you tend to look to work with?
So we work with business. I don't actually, I would, but I don't have any sort of comedy or history or the other podcasts I listen to. None of the sort of like those sorts of podcasts, but we work with business. So the most successful podcasts, I think, are training, are anything around where you have to offer value and knowledge, and people just consume it so well. So that makes the podcast more engaging, makes it more successful. I had a really interesting chat with someone the other day who set up like a shop local page, and he was going to use his podcast for that. So he was looking to do some sort of networking with people who are his target clients. But the way he was going to do that was by creating a shop local page and shop local podcast to go out to people in the local area and then invite them on to guest speakers. It was a very different way of doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, it was. I'll talk to you in more detail about that later. But essentially, you can use a podcast for anything in business. But being honest, I think if you're a trainer, a mentor, if you offer a service where you want to sort of train people in how to do the basics, or if you've got a huge customer base, like a huge following on social media, definitely then podcasts are ideal for you, and that's where most of our clients come from. I would say anything over 3,000 in your Facebook group, where you're offering value within that group, you want to be considering a podcast, because you've got the core base there to start pushing a podcast to, and pushing them over the 4 platforms, which is really going to help your business.
Brilliant. You touched on it already a little bit. Is there any other projects that you can tell us about that you're currently working on? No, Bill's an ongoing one, isn't he?
So Bill's probably my biggest client at the moment. We've got, I don't know how my other clients feel about chatting, so I know Bill's okay with it. I don't want to talk about them. We've got a few in the pipeline that are going to be starting with us shortly, around hypnotherapy, right. And dealing with traumatic incidents, hopefully. They're going to be starting soon. We're looking forward to that. And again, that's the sort of thing where people within their target market will really engage and listen to it. And then, we've got another dog trainer coming on, but the video stuff's still very busy for us, mate. So we're probably going to have to bring someone in at some point as well, which sounds a bit crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah. When he's thinking of expanding like that, it's a big step, isn't it?
It is, mate. Yeah. And you know, with a podcast nest, I will say as well, is that I've been very, very torn, and this is very honest. But I've been very, very torn about a podcast nest podcast. And the reason for that is because how much value, like we were saying earlier, how much value can I offer someone in a podcast solely about podcasting? I think I'm going to struggle to create high value quality content in podcasts. Now, what I'm thinking about doing with that is making it more Facebook orientated, but bringing out the occasional podcast, maybe one every 3 months. So in a couple of years' time, we've got a decent library, but it's just value. And it's just pure value if you're looking to set up a podcast. So yeah, that's pretty honest, I think. I could do a full-on marketing one, which incorporates motion to profit, but there's so many out there, mate. And to be honest with you, I'd have to expand the team to do that, and I don't think that's on the cards at the moment.
Okay.
So yeah, a bit honest there. I probably should.
Oh, that's great.
That's why I preach a bit more, but I think podcasting is one of them things, right? You probably know that you should do it if you should be doing it. You probably know that it's going to help grow your business. But let's be honest, who wants to go and listen about how to create a podcast on a podcast for 4 or 5 hours? It's just, you don't do.
Absolutely. I see where you come from, and it's good that you're sort of making that evaluation, whether it's for you, and if it is, well, then, you know, again, takes us back to what we were discussing before about how often should those be to maintain that value. So that's, you know,
that's right.
You're living by your own rule book, which is good.
Yeah, and do you know what, mate? We actually do have a process where we decide whether we want to work with clients. So the other day I did a strategy call with someone talking about their podcast, give them a load of ideas about how he can take it forward. But at this moment in time, it's not right. His podcast isn't going to go the places he thinks it's going to go because it's not direct enough, but also it just needs that little bit more following. So it's got potential and it will do in the future. But what I don't want to do is create podcasts for people who are getting stressed that it's not growing. You need to have the right seeds to be able to plant them in a pot for them to become, you know, oak trees or whatever you're going to be. If it's not right, it's not right. And yeah, we sometimes do say to people, actually, we recommend you do this before you come back to us. And I think people appreciate that honesty. Podcasting isn't for every business. If you're a week into business and you're going to start a podcast, then give that a long think. Maybe book onto a strategy call with us and we'll give you some honest thoughts. But what I will say is that I think there's so many people out there who would benefit from a podcast that aren't doing it because they think it's too expensive or time consuming. And frankly, it's not. It's probably, you know, one of the cheaper forms of media that you can create. You can repurpose a lot of what you've already done. So that's why we do the strategy calls, mate. It just sorts it all out.
So on the sort of subject of strategy calls, and for those people that are watching or listening, thinking, this is appealing to them, this is something they'd like to know more about, how can those people reach out to you?
So the best way is probably through my Facebook group. So it's a new group, to be honest, because Motion to Profit is all about video. So we've created a podcast nest. So I'd suggest that you join there and just reach out to me, Darren Ockenden, on that. I'll send you a link, if you don't mind, Darren, to put in the text of anything where they can book an appointment directly with me.
Yep, that's no problem.
I don't charge to people who come directly through me for these strategy calls. We do have other ways in which we engage people to save time wasters, we do charge. But, I'd just say, if you're thinking about a podcast, don't be shy, book an appointment, it's free. We can discuss it at a time that suits us both. And make sure that you're on the right track and that you're in a position where you're actually going to produce a podcast that works. We want clients who are going to go out and smash it. So, we need that little bit of investment from them in time, recording the episodes, and we'll just take the rest from there. That's what we do. Literally send us like this Zoom, for example, and then we'll basically do everything else for you, create the episode, and then tell you how to improve it. And that's what we do, mate. That's it. Yeah. So just book a strategy session, hopefully in the link to this episode.
Brilliant. Absolutely. And I don't mind sort of saying, it was yourself that I came to right at the beginning of my podcast journey. And the advice that you gave me was invaluable. It made it a lot smoother for me. So I can only thank you for that as well.
Yeah, good. Can't even remember the advice now, mate. It wasn't even that long ago, was it? That's how bad my memory is.
No, it was about 7 weeks ago, apparently.
Yeah. Sorry, I said to you, I've had a really nasty chest infection. I've been sleeping most of that 6 weeks, I think. But mate. Do you know what? I enjoy helping people, and like we're friends. We offer, our businesses sort of overlapping in some ways from a video side. We've discussed things that we do in the past, but that doesn't just have to be for people that I'm friends with like yourself. It can be pretty much anyone. Like I said, I only put the times out there that I can do. So if people don't book on strategy calls, I'll just be doing other bits. Book on and discuss it with me if you're unsure, or even if you think it's something that you might do, you might not, you don't know how it's going to work. Let's discuss it. Let's see if there's feet to it. And if there is, let's grow it. Just imagine that where you are now, you're not doing anything, but imagine that you do your podcast. We do it all for you. So there's no effort, it's effortless. And then in 6 months, a year's time, you'll where Bill is, one of our clients, in 6 months, where you've got 33 episodes made, and actually someone's paying you to produce your own media, which is bringing you in clients. That's what we're looking for, and they're the clients that we're looking for. We want that win-win situation. So book onto a call, see if you think it's something we can do, and and if it is, we'll do it.
Brilliant. And last question before I let you go, and this one is just for fun and completely off topic. I don't mind saying I've prepped you a little bit for this one because it is a bit random. But if you were stuck in a lift with someone, who would you want that to be? And it's not allowed to be a lift engineer.
Okay. So a really boring answer. Like some people probably say, Muhammad Ali because I love boxing, or this or that. I love my history, as I've said to you already. Mine would be a Roman called Marcus Agrippa, who was amazing. He basically won the civil war for Octavian or Augustus. And when Octavian got really ill, thought he was going to die, he sort of stood into power. And he's the only Roman I knew that when he got better, willingly stood back and said, back to you. And I just think that's amazing, amazing relationship. It'd just be a nice bloke to meet. But if there was no interpreter, because I don't speak very good Latin, then again, maybe the Duke of Wellington or something boring like that. Sorry, if you're not a history fan, you're probably thinking this guy is a loser.
There's certainly a trend going on there, isn't there? There's certainly a trend with your answers there.
Yeah, mate. I love my history. I love my sports as well. I'm a Liverpool fan for football. I take my kids to go and watch rugby. But yeah, history just gets it for me. I just love it. And yeah, that's good. Yeah, if it was someone more modern, someone still alive, I'd quite like to meet Johnny Wilkinson. I'll never forget, no matter how drunk I was at 6, 7 in the morning, whatever time it was, 2003, when he kicked that drop goal in the World Cup final to win us the World Cup in extra time. I'd love to meet him and talk to him about that, I suppose. So my alive person would be Johnny Wilkinson, I reckon, or Martin Johnson, the captain, or both, ideally.
Well, Darren, thank you very much. As I said, you're our first guest, so thank you very much for putting your bit of faith in myself for getting through this. Hopefully, everybody's listening has gained some value from that. I've certainly gained some things to think about from it as well.
Yeah.
As Darren said, if you want to reach out to him, feel free to do that. We'll stick some links on when this goes out. Likewise, you can get in touch with myself if you need to. You can book in for one-to-one with myself, and the link for that is on my website. It's www.followmymedia.co.uk. That's free in there to help you grow your business online. I'm sure, speaking for Darren and I, that we hope you've gained some value from it. Please feel free to give us a rating review on this podcast or video, whichever you're watching or viewing it on, to be notified of other episodes that are coming through. And please feel free to share it out. See you all on the next episode. Take care, and I'll see you next time.